Welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast, where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Taylor Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories, amplified voices, challenge norms, and foster understanding. And today, I have the immense pleasure of being with Sawyer Cole, memoirist, author, bookstagrammer, and I am so excited to talk about their memoir and all of the things. So, Sawyer, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your memoir and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Sawyer Cole. My pronouns are they, them. I am a North Carolina native, implant to Wisconsin. I had a story inside me since I was little that I knew I needed to get out from suffering from mental health issues and not getting the help I needed to growing up queer in the South. I didn't have the help I needed. So once I became a functioning adult, got the help that I needed, I realized that I had a story to tell. And what better way to tell that than through books? And what better audience to speak to than through Bookstagram? So I I just wrote down and didn't even have a desk. I sat on my bed and just wrote crisscross applesauce and just pounded it out on the keyboard.
I love that. I love that you talked about having like a story inside of you. So, can you talk a little bit about your process of writing your memoir on your bed, crisscross applesauce, and the impact it had on your understanding of your own identity and journey?
Yeah, speaking to the identity and journey part, I actually was in undergrad school and had to write this paper and was taking a gender identity class. And I remember saying, maybe I'm not a lesbian because this title doesn't fit. And I scoured the college library for articles about gender, and that's how I discovered trans non-binary. And I'm like, this fits. Or I was non-binary. Then I was like, well, non-binary doesn't fit. So then that trans piece fit. So it was an evolution of creating and rediscovering myself. Um, but sitting on the bed writing, it was literally I didn't even have chapter ideas. It was just going through I always wanted to write a biography. It started out as a biography and autobiography, and I wanted to write it for my biological dad who left when I was 6 months old and kinda shove it in his face. This is what you missed out on. Like, this is the life that you helped procreate, but then you bounced. And then I discovered that, he doesn't deserve that from me. So then it became a tool of helping other people, knowing of the past that I went through. It healed myself writing and getting everything out on paper. So it was just like a word dump. It wasn't like I know some people are plotters and pantsers, and I just word vomited on the page. Like it was just I sat down and a thought would come to my head and I just wrote. So it became more of an essay format rather than an autobiography.
You talked about wanting to help your readers through your own story of your own journey through identity. What is today and what was your hopes in the beginning? Especially those a part of the queer community. What do you hope they take away from your memoir?
The I wrote it geared towards queer people in the South because I always joke that the queer population when I came out in my hometown was one, and that was me. So, and it gets laughs every time, but in the truth, I felt so alone and so lonely that my first boyfriend came out gay as well. So the queer population wasn't one, but he had moved away by then, but still it was like there was no community in and that's something that I longed for because growing up in an evangelical family, um, growing up queer, those two things were like oil and vinegar, like they just didn't mesh well. So I hope that they get out that there are people out there for you. You just have to reach out, extend the hand, and I know my thing was going to bars, and I know that in this culture now, they're gearing away from bars. It's libraries and coffee shops, and that's so awesome that now this generation has something else. So it's finding that community within your community, and as far as the gender part, that gender is an evolution, like I said, that you don't have to stick with one label all those years later because I started out as a lesbian and now I'm trans, non-binary, using different pronouns and in the process of legally changing my name. And I'm 36. So it's all this stuff happened to me in my 30s. So it's definitely an evolution and doesn't you don't have a timestamp. My wife came out 3 years ago and she'll be 40 this year. So it's literally there's no timestamp on becoming your authentic self.
What I think I love about like what you're talking about, like in your journey and your memoir, is it seems like there's like joy in the process
Yeah.
of rediscovering and putting together new pieces of yourself. And I love that so much. That joy and discovery is not the destination, it's just like the journey and the process.
Yeah.
But were there any challenges you faced while writing about personal experiences and emotions? And even if you put any like of your personal experiences on your Bookstagram kind of publicly, were there challenges?
Yeah, I changed names, obviously, because I didn't wanna, like, step on any toes or get sued. But, like, from friends from college or my family members that I no longer speak to, that hurts. It's still very much hurtful because I just disconnected from them by setting healthy boundaries, and it's been 3 or 4 years, so that wound is still fresh. So writing about that caused a lot of, um problems internally for me to deal with. Also, writing about the suicidal ideation that I felt as a child, knowing that I now take medicine, that is something that still lingers because it's something that I still deal with. I still deal with, like, it doesn't go away. So the mental health aspect is always touchy because I like to write about things that happened in the past. I'm very much a person that likes to reflect and to talk about, like, I love to reflect and talk about things that happened then, but when they kinda bleed into the present, it creates something that's more vulnerable, and sometimes I can be vulnerable with the past and things that I've healed from, but it's especially hard to talk about the sticky stuff that's happening now that I still struggle with.
Right, because that process, while joyful, it can be messy, and looking back on the past can be very painful.
Mm,
Um, so I definitely get that. You mentioned a lot about hoping queer people in the South take away that there's community around them, which is so funny. My mom actually today on the phone, she was like, "Do you have any friends that aren't queer?" And I'm just like, you sprinkled in there. But something I've been thinking about a lot lately is representation from historically marginalized identities. In what ways do you think your memoir contributes to that broader conversation about queer representation and visibility in literature?
I think that it contributes in the fact that I'm from the South. I don't and I put disclaimers on there that even though these problems and struggles are felt widely, I'm not black. I'm not Muslim. I'm not a black trans woman. So these things are I don't experience those things. And I make that abundantly clear in my memoir that even though I am queer, I am trans non-binary, that there are people out there at large that have it far worse than I do just growing up here in the South. So I take those tools and I talk about, these are my problems. However, these are problems of other people in the community um, that far exceed my problems. So I kind of open the door to, hey, you may think that I've got it bad, but these people actually statistically have it worse. So this needs to be a conversation that we also take away from my own as well.
Right. And that's a way to reach people. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was telling me that books are like mirrors and windows. So
Yeah.
reaching those people who find your experience as a mirror, to invite them to look into the window to explore more. And I love how I feel like the conversation around representation lacks nuance around, okay, yes, this is my experience, but we're not all a monolith. Like,
Yeah.
there's no one queer experience, there's no one trans experience, there's no one Black experience. Like,
Yep.
we have intersections, and that affects like our lived experiences. So definitely. Writing memoir is tough. And I just wanted to ask next, what keeps you grounded in the writing process and talking about your experiences?
Alicia and my kid. Alicia's my wife. She keeps me humbled. Um, she jokes and everything. We just went for indie bookstore day. We went to our local indie where we actually elope. And they opened a coffee shop in the bookstore. And the barista was like, "You're Sawyer. You're the one who wrote the book. We've got your book here." And Alicia just rolled her eyes and she was like, "Don't start." So she definitely keeps me grounded with that. She pulls me back to the present when I'm too far gone into the past. So she realizes the storms before I enter them. So she's able to redirect and do stuff like that. And I only allow myself to write for certain periods of time because I get just bogged down by that. So, but the next book is actually about our love story. So it won't be like super in depth, like sad and depressing, and like some essays were in my memoir. So it's definitely a more joyful book. There's some undertones, but yeah.
I love romance and a good love story. So I'm super excited. So definitely keep us updated when that's going to be ready. Have you been reading anything good lately that you want to share?
I will forever scream about Hijab Butch Blues by Lamaya H. That is by far was my top book of last year. I recommend that to anyone and everyone that asks me, even if they don't read nonfiction. I'm like, you still need to read this book. I'm rereading The Guncle by Stephen Rowley and to gear up for the Guncle Abroad. So I think that's what I'm currently I've got like 14 books going. Not 14. I've got like 4 or 5 books going at the same time. But The Guncle is just what I set down, and Hijab Butch Blues is on back there somewhere on my bookshelf. So that's definitely my top.
I just saw a post about hijab butch blue, and I was just like, it was on my radar for the longest time, but since I saw two people endorse it today, I'm gonna move it up in on my TBR.
It reminded me of Black Boy Out of Time by Harry Ziad. If you haven't read that one, the audiobook is like chef's kiss. And Black Boy Out of Time by George M. Johnson. So it was like those 3 books are just intertwined in my mind and the stories are just connected. I love it.
That's awesome. Like I haven't read Black Boy Out of Time, but I read the George M. Johnson book, and it was so good. I have to read his other one. So, my last question for you is what advice would you offer listeners who want to make a positive impact in their communities?
It started for me on Bookstagram. That's how I found my, I don't want to say political voice because it's black and white, but it's how I found my voice to speak about injustices and social situations. And then I moved to Wisconsin and met people through Alicia, through the trans community. And I just started showing up to meetings and getting involved and asking questions. So it's literally just showing up and talking. And it sounds daunting because I have anxiety and sometimes it's social anxiety, but it's just showing up. Just make your body present and they'll eventually take notice and start talking to you and what you share. So just show up. Don't be afraid to get out there and show up and make a post. Be vulnerable. That it's worked for me. Just be vulnerable, be open to change, be open to admit when you're wrong because we're all going to mess up. We're not going to have the information that we need when we mess up or when we post about something. There's always more information that's coming to light. So it's being humble enough to accept when you're wrong and moving forward with learning everything.
Thank you so much for everything you shared today. And listeners, be sure to get Sawyer's book coming home. Yes, we are super excited to have it in the store. And lastly, where can people find you and your work?
Cole's Book Nook on Instagram. I am also on bookshop.org and I am on Amazon, but I would prefer indie bookstores. So you can go to like Little District Books in DC and go to Liberation is Lit, your store, my local store, Lion's Mouth. Look them all up online. Support local, support bookshop.org more specifically.
Yes, because it doesn't matter which store you support at.
Yep.
Twice a year, they support all bookstores, like
Yep.
they send out distribution. So, yes, bookshop.org is an amazing alternative to Amazon.
Yep.
But I know as authors, like we still got to put our stuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
But yes, if there's alternatives, we're going to push the alternatives.
Yep.
So thank you so much again for being on the podcast. I had such a great time chatting with you. And if any listeners have any stories they want to share or suggest any topics or just want to connect, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Liberation is Lit, or visit our website, liberationislit.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review and remember that your voice matters. And together, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world. Thank y'all.